In the aftermath of the terrorist attacks in Pahalgam, there seems to be one question that is dominating the public agenda right now. There is, of course, the possibility of a military crisis that could escalate between India and Pakistan over the next coming days and weeks. We are aware that a high-level meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security, which really brings in the top ministers and officials of the Indian government together to consider India's security response to this terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir. Of course, big questions being raised now about whether or not we are likely to see some sort of military retaliation against Pakistan, and if so, what that retaliation might look like. Joining me to decode exactly this question is Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, who, of course, is a former army commander. Lieutenant General Shukla, thank you so much for joining me. Could you tell us a little bit about first, if you could bring us a little sense of how you're seeing the terror attacks that took place in Pahalgam, what the motivations were, why now? Could you set the scene for us in terms of what happened in the Pahalgam terror attacks?
So, Shashank, thank you for getting me on your show. And my, initial thoughts are like this, that, depending on the details that we have got so far, to me, it appears without doubt that it is a dastardly, cowardly, gruesome act. That religious targeting bit makes it as low as even terror can get. So that's one part. Secondly, if you link it with the speech of Asim Munir and the uptick in infiltration attempts over the last few months, it appears to me that, for a while we had General Bajwa talking of geoeconomics, and it did seem that some sense had returned to Pakistan's strategic outlook. Now it's very clear that terror as a central tool in their statecraft is back. It also, now I like to make two things. One is, it is also an act of desperation, because if you look at Pakistan, it is on a fissiparous boil. Look what's happening in Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They are fragmenting. Their political flows have been blocked. They are fragmenting in such a manner that POK will just roll over to us. We don't have to do anything. That's the second point. Third point is that undoubtedly it is a reverse. And I'll come to what we should do about that reverse. But my initial response is that, we should not let this one act say that the entire normalcy has been ended. We have made great gains in Kashmir in the larger terror business, in terms of getting tourist flows growing, getting the economy growing, normalcy returning to J&K. So we should not let this one incident, these refrains that I'm hearing that this is end of normalcy, it certainly is not. There have been huge gains that were made, and that is exactly what the Pakistani state has sought to target. These, local livelihoods, tourism, economy growing. Now, the good part is what? We have seen some very sharp political signaling. The Prime Minister speaking to the Home Minister from Jeddah, terminating his visit, flying back. You spoke of a CCS meeting. So all indications tell me that the response is going to be firm, it is going to be calibrated, it is going to be strong. In all the levers of our statecraft, there are many options up the chain, but given the gruesomeness of the event, I think the central response has to be military. Now, this military response must, not be shrouded in any emotional context. I mean, emotions are high and reasonably so. We will respond, but that place, time must be of our choosing. The domain must be carefully thought through. Pakistani responses have also to be seen through. Another point I may make, that it is undoubtedly a reverse, but it is a seminal moment in our statecraft. I think Pakistan has misunderstood the international scene greatly. It may have erred grievously. This timing, if at all there is timing between the attack and Mr. J.D. Vance's visit, right. The international mood has changed greatly. They have not read the Trump administration rightly. So in that sense, not only a military response, but is this a time for a very sharp response in terms of the larger Indian statecraft, which is to follow this through and isolate the ISI and the Pak army as, this pariah in terror. So it is a reverse. All strong states are resilient to absorb this. We have done this many times in the past. Our strategic military instrument is capable of responding it. We should not second judge that. So that is my initial reaction. We are a big state. India now is, a pretty strong power in many terms, economically, technologically. So it should be a calibrated, sophisticated, well thought through response.
Understood. General Shukla, could I ask you a little bit about, given your vast experience in national security and of course handling and your experience in the military, could I ask you where exactly do we go from here in the next couple of days and weeks? Could you explain that? Of course, a lot of confusion right now about how exactly the Indian government is likely to deal with this moving forward. You've been on the inside. Can you tell us a little bit about how things are likely to evolve in the coming hours and days?
So see, I've commanded a division in Baramulla. I can tell you, while I'm not justifying what it has happened, but, keeping these alertness levels, vigilance levels, in a constant state of readiness for a long time is not easy. Whenever you have long periods of no incidents happening, for example, Baramulla, one side you have the attack on Mohra gun position, then on Uri, and we responded. Now, there are a number of options from the LC to, shallow responses, deeper responses, precision strikes. There are a whole lot of options which, are ready with formations. They are constantly fine-tuned at the levels of the headquarters. It would not be proper to, uh, discuss them on the television platforms, but we have military responses. We have domains to choose from. The targeting can be nuanced. The message has to go across this time. See, last time we did demonstrate in Pulwama that we did demonstrate new normals in our strategic outlook when we went as deep as Balakot. Did it make a difference to the Pakistanis? Certainly it did. It did for a very long time. And now that they have challenged it again, I think the international community is behind us. And as I said in the beginning, Pakistan has erred grievously. And but whatever military response, we should not put pressure on the powers that be, both political and military. They have a job to do. They will evaluate those options. But I think it will be a very firm military response. And also the other levers of statecraft, diplomatic, economic, increasing the other pain points. I think, Pakistan has been thoroughly ill-advised in doing it. And it will pay a pretty heavy price.
General Shukla, I hate to ask you to speculate again, but you were walking us through some of you mentioning, of course, the options. There has been, of course, some discussion in the media from people who cover national security about, of course, after the Uri and Pulwama terror attacks, as you were mentioning, there were public strikes conducted by India militarily. Of course, the form of those varied, but they were public strikes, and you were able to, in the minds of the Indian public as well, establish some level of satisfaction that the issue was being dealt with. There was also some deterrent value. There was also an international signaling that was done about India's willingness to strike back against terror attacks that come from Pakistan. So a lot of pros and cons being debated there. Also, of course, there has been some discussion out in the public about covert means being used. Could you just walk us through, without, of course, speculating about what the government might do, but could you walk us through the relative merits of both of these options? For example, public strikes that have been conducted in the past. What was the thinking of the Indian side? Whether you think those public strikes work, or do you believe that covert means more specifically suited India's interests? Could you explain what the options are in front of India, what the pros and cons are, without, of course, asking you to speculate about what India will do exactly in this case?
See, since it is a direct assault by the Pakistani military on, our democracy, on the whole growth paradigm in Kashmir, the military response has to be such to restore deterrence. And that deterrence per se has to be focused on the central character in this, which is the Pakistani military and General Asim Munir. So that establishment has to pay the price. How it does it, there are a number of military options. It will not be right for me to, discuss those. But it is to target the Pakistan military establishment, the ISI, and the central figure behind this, re-establishing deterrence in a manner so that next time even the thought doesn't cross their mind, because they know it is a price to pay. And I suppose that is exactly what the public also expects. So I wouldn't draw any distinction between a public response and a military response, but the details, the timings, those kind of things, you will agree with me, will not be, it will not be responsible for anyone to debate on television platforms.
Understood. Could I also ask you, sir, that we've seen, of course, a ceasefire on the line of control since 2021. Do you think there's any possibility of that being broken? We also just saw just a couple of weeks ago, India and the Indian Army, of course, accused Pakistan of conducting operations across the line of control that violated the agreement that both sides had in 2021. Of course, India alleged that Pakistan was breaking that agreement. Do you now see that ceasefire that has sort of held since 2021 breaking apart? Do you think there's a real risk of that?
See, given what has happened, it is such a massive attack that, a ceasefire on the line of control loses all meaning. That is, just one segment of the larger Indo-Pak calculus. So, I mean, the escalation, I think, in my humble view, the response will be far beyond that. Just not, hotting up the LC all over again. The response has to be beyond that, given the gruesomeness of the attack. And so whether the LC hots up from here on is not really the matter. The point is that it has to hit the heart of the Pakistani military establishment. And see, the Indian army and the Indian military is a vast and deep organization. It has all kinds of, there is a counter-infiltration grid. There are people who are earmarked to, execute actions across. There are institutions to carry out deep strikes. So we have the depth, the sophistication, and the nuance to execute a host of options. And I don't think the hotting up of the LC per se is a very significant issue at this point.
Understood. So my last question to you, of course, you were mentioning the Pulwama terror attacks, of course, the Balakot airstrikes that took place right after that, and there was a sense that the Balakot airstrikes really, as you were saying, was a break from the past. The Indian government, of course, showing that it would take a strong position on cross-border terror. There was also a sense that it had established some sort of deterrence in the mind of Pakistan in terms of carrying out more such operations. Now, of course, some of the public commentary around the Pahalgam attacks is suggesting that sort of deterrent effect after 5 years of the 5-6 years of the Balakot airstrike has worn off somewhat, and therefore there is a need to re-establish deterrence. Could I ask you, in your mind, how you saw the impact of the Balakot airstrike that India carried out all the way back 5-6 years ago? Do you believe that it did have that sort of deterrent effect? Does that deterrent effect need to be re-established? My final question to you.
Absolutely. So, deterrence is a long game. It's a cat and mouse game. And the first point is that Balakot was extremely significant. We went, 70, 80 kilometers deep. We went across, what we traditionally we used to confine ourselves to the LC and the POK. We went beyond. And the exact message given was that a terror strike will have this response. You see, the game that Pakistan was playing all this while was that, terror are pinpricks. India has the larger conventional capability, but since terror is kept below a certain threshold, there'll be no conventional response. So we showed them that there are no such red lines for us. When our central interests are hit, we reserve the right to respond in the manner that we choose. And it had a great effect on, subsequently you saw peace along the line of control and a host of issues. Now, I think Pakistan is in such a mess that when their, thinkers, whatever low-grade strategic thinkers they have, when they were looking at their statecraft, please understand, Pakistan is in a solid mess. It is a failing state. Its economy is below the Bombay Stock Exchange. And when they examine that the options that they have in the midst of their own mess, they pull out this rusted arrow from their quiver of terror. I think they've misread the international environment greatly. They've misread the Indian army greatly. So while it is a temporary reverse, it's a huge opportunity to respond with such, sophistication, precision, resolve, that this terror state gets a permanent message. This is the time to label them as a terror pariah going beyond the military dimension. So I think it's a huge opportunity. And when we do that, deterrence will be restored. And militaries are meant to restore deterrence and respond if, deterrence is broken. So that's exactly what the challenge has been thrown by Pakistan, and we will respond to it appropriately.
Understood. General Shukla, I did say that was my final question, but at the risk of imposing on you a little bit, I will ask one final one. We've seen, of course, a swathe of international support come in for India. Lots of world leaders have held conversations with Prime Minister Modi expressing their support. Of course, the first among them was President Donald Trump of the United States. You were mentioning, of course, that JD Vance is also in town at this point in time. There's a sense that, of course, the Trump administration has also condemned terrorism in the past. It's also called on Pakistan to pull back its support for terrorism in the past during Trump's first term. How effective do you think that support, diplomatic support that has come so quickly from the United States, do you think that's likely to be a key diplomatic asset moving forward? How exactly do you think India can best use it to its advantage moving forward as it considers these military options, but also considers the fact that there's the international community, there's the international opinion to take care of there as well?
See, I think it's a huge advantage. Advantage in the sense that, if I were just to put myself in the shoes of the Pakistanis and look at this from their perspective or their lens, I mean, if they thought that while doing this, while Mr. Vance was here, they'll draw attention to the issue of Kashmir, the jugular vein, as Asim Munir has said. I mean, they don't understand Trump 2.0. They don't understand Mr. J.D. Vance. I think what has happened is that they, have told the Americans that despite your being here, we will do what we wish to do. It is thoroughly intemperate, unwise, and that is why they will pay the cost. And they're already paying it. You saw the tweet of Mr. Trump, the response of Mr. J.D. Vance, and the broader international community. Having said that, India now is fifth largest economy, soon to be third largest. We are in the gymnasium of, shall I say, bigger power competition. Our national security responses have to be strong, sophisticated, and nuanced. And therefore, the international support is, of course, an enabling factor, but we have to do the execution on our own. And that is precisely what the military instrument is for. If I may make just one point, Shashank, we constantly talk of the Israelis, and how they are threatened. May I very briefly point to you and your viewers, look at how grim our security situation is. On the north, we have China, which is what the military component to the power differential is $450 billion. To our west, we have Pakistan, this whole terror dynamic, and Turkey. Turkey is a drone superpower. Mr. Erdogan was here. A lot of dronery stuff has been passed on to the Pakistanis. Look at East Bangladesh, Lal Monir Hat, the statements of Mr. Yunus, ISI, Bangladesh and China, oceanic excess. So this is, apart from the response, this is a good opportunity for us to sit up and see how we can handle these national security challenges, not only strongly, but in a long-term perspective. So, this is also an issue which needs to get our attention, and not only when such strikes happen. This is the reality of India, and we have to brace up to this national security challenge in a very wide-angled sense. And a firm response to what the Pakistanis have done will, I think, be the beginning of that evolution. So I therefore say, it is a seminal moment in our statecraft, and I have the utmost confidence that we will rise to the occasion.
Understood. General Raj Shukla, thank you so much for your time, for joining us here, and for your sober comments on what India's options are moving forward in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you again, General Shukla, and thank you so much to our viewers for joining us here.